The impossible fix. The quantum communication array of research station Aurora 7 sparked and died with a sound like breaking glass. In the observation deck, representatives from 12 different species watched their holographic displays flicker into darkness. The most important diplomatic summit in galactic history had just lost its connection to the outside universe. Commander Thrix, whose crystalline body refracted the emergency lighting into prismatic patterns, clicked his mandibles in what Jake Morrison had learned meant extreme frustration. The Zelkarian's voice resonated through the station's translation systems with harmonics that made human teeth ache. "Impossible timing," Thrix muttered, his crystal form pulsing red. "The hegemony fleet expects our response within 6 standard hours. Without the quantum array, we cannot reach them." Jake wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades. He'd been crawling through maintenance shafts for the past 8 hours, trying to keep the station's aging systems running during the summit. Aurora 7 was old by galactic standards, a joint research facility built when humans first joined the Intergalactic Council. Most of its systems were held together by determination and spare parts. "What's the damage report?" asked Dr. Varsha, the 10-3 delegate whose purple tentacles writhed with nervous energy. Her species were known throughout the galaxy as master engineers, builders of the great ring stations that orbited dying stars. Thrix's aide, a floating Etherian named Wisp, projected diagnostic data into the air. Complete cascade failure in the quantum entanglement chamber. The resonance crystals have been destabilized beyond recovery. Our calculations suggest replacement is the only viable option. How long for a replacement array to arrive? This came from Ambassador Corex, whose insectoid features betrayed no emotion but whose pheromone signature reeked of anxiety. 14 standard days, Wisp replied, assuming the hegemony doesn't interpret our silence as rejection and begin their advance. The assembled delegates began rapid conversations in their native languages. Jake understood enough of the basic trade tongues to know they were discussing evacuation procedures. He continued cleaning his tools, listening to the familiar sounds of panic that always preceded the moment when aliens remembered humans existed. Dr. Vash's tentacles stopped writhing. "Wait, the human maintenance worker. He understands our equipment." Jake looked up to find 12 pairs of alien eyes, optical, sensors, and consciousness fields focused on him. He'd been through this before on a dozen different stations and ships. First, ignore the human. Second, panic when advanced technology fails. Third, reluctantly ask the human to look at it. "I understand it well enough," Jake said, standing up and stretching muscles that ached from crawling through conduits. "Mind if I take a look?" Commander Thrix's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on a skeptical blue. "The quantum entanglement chamber operates on principles beyond most biological comprehension. Our best theorists have already confirmed the impossibility of repair." Jake had been married to Dr. Elena Rodriguez for 15 years. She was one of the galaxy's leading xenolinguists and had taught him that when aliens said something was impossible, they usually meant they couldn't think of a solution that fit their preconceptions. "Won't know until I see it," Jake said, shouldering his toolkit. The quantum communication chamber sat in the heart of Aurora 7, a room-sized marvel of crystalline matrices and energy conduits that allowed near-instantaneous communication across galactic distances. When functioning properly, it hummed with harmonic frequencies that made reality itself seem to vibrate in sympathy. Now it lay silent and dark, its crystal arrays cracked and clouded. Jake whistled low. The damage was extensive. but not unfamiliar. He'd seen similar failures on older human ships, where jerry-rigged quantum systems had been pushed beyond their design specifications. The resonance cascade started here, he said, pointing to a cluster of smaller crystals near the base of the main array. Someone tried to boost the signal strength by overcharging these secondary nodes. Dr. Vasha's tentacles curled with what Jake recognized as embarrassment. The enhancement was necessary to maintain clarity across such distances. The theoretical models suggested it was within acceptable parameters. Theoretical models don't account for metal fatigue and crystal stress, Jake replied, opening his toolkit. You can't just push old equipment harder and expect it to hold together. He pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a tuning fork and a medical scanner. Most of the aliens had never seen anything like it, because most aliens didn't believe in hitting machines with hammers until they worked. "What is that primitive instrument?" asked Wisp, his gaseous form shifting with curiosity. "Harmonic resonance detector," Jake said, running the device along the damaged crystals. "Built it myself from salvaged parts and a lot of trial and error." Detector's readings told him what he'd suspected. The quantum entanglement matrix wasn't destroyed, just severely out of phase. The crystalline structure was intact beneath the surface damage. With the right frequency adjustments and some creative rerouting, he might be able to restore enough functionality for basic communication. "I need access to the primary power couplings," Jake said, already moving toward a maintenance panel that hadn't been opened in decades. "That's not advisable," Commander Thrix said, his crystal form pulsing with alarm. "Those systems carry enough energy to vaporize organic matter." Jake paused in his work. "How long have you been running this station, Commander?" 11 standard years. "And in those 11 years, how many times has this array failed?" Thrix's colors shifted uncomfortably. 7 times. But previous failures were minor calibration errors, easily corrected by replacement of damaged components. "Right. And I've been fixing jury-rigged human equipment for 23 years. The difference between us is that humans expect things to break, so we learn how to fix them instead of just replacing them." Jake opened the power coupling access panel, revealing a maze of energy conduits and safety interlocks that would have made most engineers weep. He'd seen worse in the engine rooms of human colony ships, where everything was built to be repaired in space with whatever materials happened to be available. The problem was immediately obvious. The power flow had been rerouted through backup systems so many times that the original design was buried under layers of modifications. Each alien engineer who'd worked on the system had added their own species-preferred solutions, creating a technological mixture that shouldn't have functioned at all. Asterisk. "Okay," Jake muttered, tracing power flows with his detector. "Someone's been creative with the modifications." He began disconnecting bypass circuits and rerouting power through the original primary channels. The aliens watched with growing alarm as he dismantled what they considered essential safety systems. "You're removing the quantum flux stabilizers," Dr. Vasha observed, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Those prevent cascade failures in the entanglement matrix. They also limit power, throughput, and create harmonic interference," Jake replied, continuing his work. "The original human designers built this system to be stable without them. All these extra safeguards are just making the problem worse." As he worked, Jake became aware of a familiar presence behind him. He didn't need to turn around to know that Dr. Alina Rodriguez had entered the chamber. Her footsteps had a particular rhythm, and she always wore the same floral perfume that somehow managed to smell like Earth gardens even in the recycled air of a space station. "How's it looking?" Alina asked, settling down beside him with the easy familiarity of someone who'd watched him work for more than a decade. Like someone tried to improve a perfectly good design by adding every safety feature in the Galactic. "Engineering manual," Jake replied, making final adjustments to the power routing. "But the basic structure is sound. I think I can get it working." Alina smiled, the expression lighting up her face in the way that had first caught Jake's attention in the university maintenance bay where they'd met. She was working on her doctoral thesis in xenolinguistics then, trying to decode the harmonic patterns of crystalline speech. He'd been fixing the environmental systems in her lab, and had noticed that she was trying to analyze the patterns as mathematical equations instead of musical harmonies. "Dr. Rodriguez," Commander Thrix said, his crystalline form shifting to a more respectful blue-white. "We did not expect to see you in the technical sections." "Oh, I always come to watch when Jake's working on something interesting," Alina replied casually. "It's fascinating to see how he approaches problems that stump everyone else." Ambassador Corix's antenna twitched with confusion. "You are familiar with this maintenance worker?" Elena's laugh carried genuine warmth and a hint of pride that made Jake's heart skip a beat, even after all these years. "Maintenance worker, Ambassador, meet Dr. Jake Morrison, formerly of the Terran Institute of Technology's Quantum Engineering Department. He holds patents on half the communication systems in the human fleet and has been consulting on interspecies technology integration for the past decade." The silence that followed was profound enough that Jake could hear the subtle harmonics of the station's life support systems. He looked up from his work to find every alien in the chamber staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. "Your husband?" Commander Thrix's voice carried harmonics Jake had never heard before, probably the crystalline, the equivalent of stuttering. 15 years next month, Alina said, slipping her arm through Jake's with casual affection. "Best decision I ever made was marrying the guy who could fix anything." Dr. Vash's tentacles had gone completely still, which Jake knew meant she was processing information that didn't fit her worldview. "But you were working in the maintenance shafts, with common tools, because that's where the problems usually are," Jake said, returning to his work. "You can run all the theoretical analyses you want, but eventually someone has to crawl into the dirty spaces and figure out why the actual hardware isn't doing what the models say it should." He made the final connection and stepped back. The quantum array flickered, then burst into brilliant life. Crystalline matrices sang in perfect harmony, as entangled particles across the galaxy recognized their partners and resumed their eternal dance. Communication channels opened throughout the chamber, connecting Aurora 7 to relay stations across 3 galactic sectors. "Quantum entanglement re-established," Wisp announced, his gaseous form swirling with what Jake recognized as excitement. Full communication capability restored across all frequencies. Commander Thrix's crystalline body cycled through a rapid sequence of colors that Jake's wife had taught him meant profound surprise mixed with grudging respect. The theoretical probability of successful repair was less than 3%. "How did you accomplish this?" Jake began packing his tools with practiced efficiency. "The same way humans accomplish most things, Commander. We refuse to accept that something can't be fixed." Alina stood and brushed dust from her uniform, her eyes sparkling with the mixture of pride and affection that had sustained their marriage through postings on a dozen different worlds and stations. "That's my husband. He doesn't believe in impossible." The quantum array hummed with perfect efficiency as the diplomatic summit resumed its vital work. Outside the chamber windows, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. And somewhere among them, the hegemony fleet waited for a response that could now be sent thanks to human stubbornness and a 23-year-old toolkit held together with spare parts and determination. As they walked away from the chamber, Alina slipped her hand into Jake's. Behind them, the aliens were already recalculating their assumptions about human capabilities, but Jake barely noticed. He was already thinking about the next problem that would need solving. Because on a station like Aurora 7, there was always something that needed fixing, and humans, Jake knew with quiet pride, were very good at fixing things. Asterisk recognition and new challenges. The diplomatic summit resumed with renewed urgency. Through the repaired quantum communication array, holographic representatives from across the galaxy materialized in Aurora 7's central conference chamber. The hegemony's ultimatum still hung over the proceedings like a storm cloud, but at least now they could respond. Jake Morrison found himself in an unexpected position. Word of his repair had spread through the station's alien crew with the speed that only gossip could achieve. Maintenance workers who had barely acknowledged his existence for months now nodded respectfully when he passed. Engineers who had dismissed his suggestions as primitive now sought his opinion on their projects. Dr. Alina Rodriguez watched her husband navigate this new attention with the bemused expression of someone who'd always known his worth, but had grown accustomed to others underestimating it. They sat in the station's observation lounge, sharing coffee from Jake's personal supply and watching the diplomatic proceedings on the main display. You realize you've created a minor crisis of confidence among the technical staff, Alina said, stirring synthetic cream into her coffee. Half of them are questioning everything they think they know about human capabilities. Jake chuckled, a sound that carried more satisfaction than smugness. Good. Maybe now they'll listen when I tell them that adding 17 different safety systems to a simple power coupling is going to cause more problems than it solves. On the display, Ambassador Corex was presenting the Council's unified response to the hegemony's demands. The insectoid diplomats' translated words carried the weight of dozens of civilizations. The Intergalactic Council rejects the hegemony's territorial claims and reaffirms our commitment to the sovereignty of independent worlds. Alina leaned back in her chair, studying the assembled delegates. The political situation is more complex than most people realize. The hegemony isn't just making territorial demands. They're challenging the entire basis of interspecies cooperation. How so? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. The answer: they believe that advanced civilizations should rule over primitive ones. That cooperation between species of different technological levels is inefficient and ultimately harmful. Elena's voice carried the controlled anger of someone who'd spent years fighting against such attitudes. Sound familiar? Jake nodded grimly. He'd encountered similar prejudices throughout his career, both from aliens who saw humans as primitive newcomers and from humans who believed they had nothing to learn from other species. The irony was that both groups missed the point entirely. Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Thrix, whose crystalline form flickered with urgent patterns as he approached their table. Dr. Morrison, we require your immediate assistance. Asterisk. Jake set down his coffee cup with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to treasure Earth luxuries. What's the problem, Commander? The hegemony fleet has arrived at the edge of the system. They are demanding immediate surrender of Aurora 7 as proof of our compliance with their territorial claims. Thrix's colors shifted to a deep red that Jake recognized as fear. Our defensive systems are insufficient to resist their assault, but evacuation is impossible with so many diplomatic personnel aboard. Alina and Jake exchanged glances. They'd been through enough crises together to communicate without words. She raised an eyebrow that asked if he was thinking what she thought he was thinking. He nodded slightly, confirming that yes, he probably had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Show me the tactical situation," Jake said, standing up. The station's command center buzzed with controlled panic. Holographic displays showed the hegemony fleet in stark detail. 16 massive warships arranged in a perfect blockade formation. Around Aurora 7, their weapon signatures indicated firepower sufficient to reduce the research station to atomic particles within minutes. Their technology is superior to ours in every measurable category, reported Lieutenant Jask. The 10th tactical officer, whose normally purple skin had faded to a worried gray. Shields, weapons, propulsion systems, even our newest defensive platforms are obsolete compared to hegemony standards. Jake studied the tactical display with the same methodical attention he'd given to the broken quantum array. Alina watched him work, recognizing the signs of his mind shifting into what she privately called engineering mode, the state where problems became puzzles and impossible became merely difficult. "What's their formation pattern based on?" Jake asked. Lieutenant Jask's tentacles writhed with confusion. "Standard siege doctrine. Maximum firepower coverage with overlapping defensive fields. It's textbook hegemony strategy, right? And textbook strategies assume your opponent will respond in predictable ways." Jake moved to the communications console, his fingers dancing over controls designed for alien hands but modified over the years to accommodate human operators. "Alina, I need you to translate something for me." "What are you planning?" Commander Thrix asked, his crystalline form cycling through colors that indicated deep concern. "Something the hegemony won't expect," Jake replied, opening a direct channel. "To the lead hegemony vessel. Because they think like you do, that there's only one right way to solve any given problem." The main display flickered, then resolved into the image of a hegemony commander. The alien was humanoid but clearly predatory, with metallic skin and eyes like polished mirrors. When it spoke, its voice carried the absolute certainty of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "Research Station, Aurora 7. You will surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. Resistance is futile. Your primitive defensive systems cannot oppose hegemony might." "Commander," Jake said, his voice carrying the casual confidence that Alina had learned meant he was about to do something extraordinary. "I'm Dr. Jake Morrison, Chief Systems Engineer for Aurora 7. I'd like to propose an alternative to immediate surrender." The hegemony commander's mirror eyes focused on Jake with predatory interest. "You wish to negotiate terms. Your position offers no leverage for bargaining. Actually, I'd like to invite you to observe a demonstration of our defensive capabilities." Jake continued, his hands moving across the console with practiced efficiency. "I think you'll find our approach ... educational." Alina translated Jake's words into the formal diplomatic languages required for official communication, but she could see the confusion rippling through the assembled alien officers. They had no idea what Jake was planning, and neither did she. "You have no weapons capable of threatening hegemony vessels," the commander replied. "Our sensors have analyzed your defensive grid thoroughly." "Oh, we're not going to shoot at you," Jake said with a smile that Alina recognized as genuinely dangerous. "We're going to show you why assuming you understand primitive technology can be a fatal mistake." Jake's fingers flew over the console, accessing systems that most of the station's crew didn't even know existed. Aurora 7 had been built during humanity's early integration into galactic society, when human engineers had been given alien technology and told to make it work within human design philosophies. The result was a station that looked standard on the surface but contained dozens of hidden modifications and backup systems that existed purely because humans refused to accept that anything couldn't be improved. Initiating cascade resonance in the quantum communication array, Jake announced, "Alina, warn everyone to cover their ears." "Jake, what are you?" Commander Thrix began. But his words were cut off by a sound that no one aboard Aurora 7 had heard before. The quantum array, designed to facilitate communication across interstellar distances, began to sing. Not the subtle harmonies of normal operation, but a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull and out into space itself. The sound grew louder and more complex, building into harmonics that made reality itself seem to flex. On the tactical display, the hegemony ships began to drift out of formation. Their perfect siege pattern dissolved as navigation systems struggled to compensate for gravitational fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible. "What is happening?" the hegemony commander demanded, his mirror eyes reflecting alarm. "What weapon are you using?" "It's not a weapon," Jake replied, making delicate adjustments to the harmonic frequencies. "It's a gravitational resonance cascade generated by overloading our quantum communication system. The same quantum entanglement that allows us to talk across galactic distances can also create localized distortions in space-time." Alina stared at her husband with a mixture of admiration and terror. "Jake, please tell me you know what you're doing." "Mostly," he admitted, continuing his adjustments. "The theoretical framework is sound. Einstein's equations allow for this kind of manipulation, but most civilizations dismiss it as impractical because it requires precise harmonic control and a willingness to push equipment beyond its design specifications." The hegemony fleet was now completely out of formation, their ships struggling against gravitational currents that pulled them in seemingly random directions. On the display, the commander's metallic features showed the first signs of uncertainty Jake had seen. Asterisk. "This is not possible," the commander said. "Gravitational manipulation requires technology beyond your civilization's capabilities." "See, that's where you're wrong," Jake replied, making a final adjustment that sent new harmonics rippling through. "Space, you're thinking about this like an engineering problem. Build the right machine, apply the right energy, get the desired result. But humans don't just engineer solutions, we improvise them." The quantum array song reached a crescendo that made the station's hull ring like a bell. On the tactical display, the hegemony ships found themselves caught in a gravitational current that was pushing them steadily away from Aurora 7. "Your ships aren't in danger," Jake continued, addressing the increasingly bewildered hegemony commander. "But they're going to need about 6 hours to fight free of the gravitational distortion. That should give our diplomats enough time to present our full response to your territorial claims." Alina translated Jake's explanation into the formal, diplomatic channels, but she could see that the real communication was happening between the human engineer and the alien commander. Both were beginning to understand that they were dealing with something unprecedented. "How did you anticipate our formation pattern?" the commander asked. "Because you think like an engineer," Jake replied. "Maximum efficiency, minimum risk, everything by the book. But sometimes the best solution isn't the most efficient one, it's the one your opponent doesn't expect." As the hegemony fleet drifted Helplessly, in the gravitational currents, Jake began powering down the quantum array. The harmonics faded gradually, leaving behind a silence that seemed profound after the cosmic symphony. Commander Thrix's crystalline form had cycled through so many colors during the demonstration that he looked like a living rainbow. Dr. Morrison, that was the most reckless and brilliant tactical maneuver I have ever witnessed. That's my husband, Alina said, her voice carrying pride and love in equal measure. He specializes in impossible solutions to impossible problems. The diplomatic summit resumed with a new dynamic. Word of Jake's gravitational gambit had spread throughout the galactic community, carried by quantum communications to every corner of civilized space. Humanity's reputation had shifted overnight from primitive newcomers to unpredictable innovators whose capabilities defied conventional analysis. The hegemony, faced with evidence that their assumptions about primitive civilizations might be flawed, agreed to extended negotiations. Their fleet remained at the edge of the system, but their demands for immediate surrender had been replaced by grudging requests for technological consultations. Jake found himself appointed as Aurora 7's new chief systems engineer, a position that came with resources he'd never dreamed of and the authority to implement modifications that would have been considered impossible a week earlier. Alina watched from the observation lounge as her husband worked with a mixed team of human and alien engineers, designing hybrid systems that combined the best of multiple technological approaches. The barriers between species were breaking down as they discovered that diversity of thought was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. "You know," Alina said as Jake joined her for their evening coffee, "I think you just changed how the galaxy thinks about cooperation between species." Jake smiled, the expression carrying satisfaction and hope in equal measure. "Maybe, or maybe I just reminded everyone that the best solutions usually come from the people nobody expects to have them." Outside the observation windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and among them, representatives of dozens of civilizations worked together to build a future where differences were strengths and impossible was just another word for not yet figured out. And in the quantum arrays of Aurora 7, harmonics still sang with the echoes of human ingenuity and the promise of discoveries yet to come. Asterisk.